Hey, what's happening? This is Matt from Gruesome, and you're listening to Sonic Perspective, so turn it up, man.
Hi everyone, Rodrigo Altaf here from Sonic Perspectives. I have here on the phone a member of a band which is taking the word homage to an extreme level in more ways than one. Matt Harvey from Gruesome. Matt, how are you?
Hey man, how are you, dude? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Let's put things in perspective first. We can start with a bit of a history of Gruesome, how you guys started, and then we'll talk about the new album. Is that okay?
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, so the band stemmed from the tours called Death to All, right?
Yeah, basically that's where the idea sort of started germinating. For those who don't know, Death to All is the members of the band Death, of course, minus Chuck Schuldiner, who is no longer with us, the main composer, guitarist, and vocalist of the band. But it's all the other guys, and they've gone out and done a bunch of tours where they play the Death material for people, because there's a lot of fans, especially younger fans, who never got to see the band live, and a lot of older guys like me who are nostalgic for when they used to be able to see the band live. And the first Death to All tour here in the States, I think it was like 9 days or something. And at the last minute, I ended up filling in on guitar and vocals because Stefan from Obscura, who was supposed to be doing it, he had visa issues and couldn't get into the country. So I had a lot of fun playing and hanging out with all the guys, legendary players like Gene Hoglan and Sean Reiner, Paul Masvidal, Bobby Coble, and so on and so forth. And I had a really good time doing it, and it was really cool to kind of share my love of Death with, not just the audience every night, who were amazing, but just, the guys that helped create those records. And I did that tour, and I did one other show, and then because I have a bunch of other stuff going on, my schedule kind of prevented me from continuing on with it. But Gus Rios, our drummer in Gruesome, was on a few of the tours working with Sean Reiner, who is like one of his closest friends. So Gus was drum teching. He was also playing a couple songs, and our paths crossed when my other band, Exhumed, was playing with Death to All in, I think it was Maryland, Silver Springs, Maryland, I guess. Anyway, Gus and I kind of just started chatting, and we really hit it off, and we kind of had a lot of the same ideas about what we liked about Death and what we liked about the Death to All tour. And then, inevitably you have a couple drinks and you then start saying things like, well, if I was doing it, I would do blah, 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 blah. And I would call this guy and play these songs, and that would be fun. And so we talked about maybe, trying to do something like that within the sort of Death to All umbrella. When that didn't come together, I sort of jokingly said, well, I'll just write some songs that sound like Death, and we'll just record those. And I didn't mean it seriously, I just was just talking shit. But then I ended up having some time on my hands, and I was like, oh yeah, that was funny when I said that. Like, why don't I try and write a song? And then that song became Gangrene, which was on our first record, Savage Land. I sent it to Gus just to sort of see what he thought. He ended up really liking it, and we started working on the material, and here we are now, 4 or 5 years later or whatever. So
yeah, you just mentioned Savage Land. You also released a couple of EPs, but to this day, the only full length is Savage Land, right? And I noticed the cover. It's one of the most outrageous things I've ever seen, man. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, the cannibals.
Savage Land is it's very over the top. It lets you know kind of what you're in for right away.
Yeah.
One of the EPs that we did, though, Dimensions of Horror, I mean, to me, I guess I called it a mini album, but I was told by our record label that nobody says mini album anymore because it's got 6 songs. I mean, it's only really 2 songs short of a full length. And for me, I kind of consider that like our second album, Yeah. So to me, Twisted Prayers, the new one, feels like our third album, but technically it's only our second.
All right. And I'll be honest with you, I only heard Gruesome with this new release. I wasn't expecting it to sound so faithful to that sound. And certainly not to this level of honesty about it. I think it's clearly coming from the right place, right? It's not just copycatting. It's not copycatting at all. I mean, it's an honest homage to the band and to its legacy, of course.
Well, thank you for saying that. And to me, ultimately, I think that's the most important thing I want to convey to anybody that might be listening to the band. Beyond, obviously I hope they like it, and that's great. But I really want it to be very obvious that we're doing this band as a Death tribute. It's supposed to sound like Death. It's supposed to look like a Death record. It's supposed to have the same production as a Death record because it is a tribute. It's like we're a tribute band, but instead of playing cover songs, we just write our own songs, which is sort of a goofy idea, but so far it's been working for us. And I think I totally get if somebody hears the record and thinks like, I don't need this record, I already have the Death albums. I'd be like, that's very fair commentary. I just don't ever want someone to get it and be like, oh, these guys are a ripoff, they're just trying to like cash in on somebody else's work and they don't have respect for the source material, because the whole thing is done out of respect and out of fandom for Death. I mean, I guess being like respectful is sort of weird for a heavy metal band, but it is very respectful. That's what it's all about. And before we even went forward with signing the record contract and stuff, we spoke with Eric Greif, who is Chuck's intellectual property manager, and he was the person organizing all the Death to All tours and everything else, simply because we wanted to make sure that they knew about it and that they were okay with it. And, he gave us his blessing. And one of the first ways that people started hearing about the band is that he was kind enough to share a link to, I think it was our demo on the Death Facebook page, the official Death Facebook page. So that was a big help, kind of having that stamp of approval. And also, the fact that we've worked with James Murphy, who played guitar with Death, and we've worked with Sean Reinert, who played drums with Death. It's a way, not only is it cool for us as fans, it's really neat, but it's also a way for us to show the audience that, yes, this is done with the permission and the blessing of the guys who were in the band originally. And, it's all about respecting their work and celebrating their work,
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting company. It's an interesting concept for sure. It's a homage band that doesn't play the original songs. But anyway, there are some familiar faces in the band with you. So tell us about the lineup.
I'm very fortunate in that everybody else in the band lives in Florida and I live in California. And Gus really is the person that deserves the credit for putting the actual band together. Luckily, I mean, I was already friends with Robin and Dan before, so it seemed like natural choices. But our guitar player, Dan Gonzalez, most people probably know him as the guitar player in Possessed for the last several years. He's amazing. Our bass player, Robin Mason, she also plays with Urquetta. She also plays with Castrator, and she has a thrash metal cover band when she's home, not on tour, because she is also probably one of the hardest working people in the entire metal scene. She does merch and she manages bands and she co-manages Exodus and Death Angel and several other bands. She works for Testament. She works for Slayer. She works for Overkill. I mean, everybody. So she is one of the most sort of ubiquitous and well-liked people in the entire metal scene. So it's pretty cool that, it's cool that everybody in the band has kind of, they could stand on their own merit as a musician and a person within the scene. And, we're also all friends and we all get along, and it's a really ideal situation.
Yeah. I think I almost met Robin last week because she was here with the Slayer tour, and
yes.
There was a workshop with Gary Holt and the drummer of Death as well. He was here, and she manages.
Oh yeah,
Exodus,
Gene.
like I said. Yeah, Gene Hoglan. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I almost met her. I was trying to set up an interview with Gene, but anyway, I digress. We tried that; it didn't work. But anyway, congratulations on the new album, Twisted Prayers, which was released last Friday. What can you tell us about the composition and recording of that album?
We've kind of worked pretty similarly the whole time, because like I said, I'm on the West Coast, they're on the East Coast. Generally, I kind of get the framework of a song and demo it and then send it to the guys. And both Dan and Gus are pretty good engineers, so then they kind of turn my very crude, primitive recording into something that really sounds like a song, and they'll throw riffs at me that I'll work in, and so it's a long distance collaboration. But the thing that's really cool about this album for me is that it has more and more input from Gus and Dan rather than just myself. So that makes it interesting for me and challenging, and it's really like a band effort, which is very cool. So I mean, the composition, obviously it's kind of easier to write for this band because we have a template,
Yeah.
It's not like a completely original band looking for their own direction where they just sort of start with silence and it's like, all right, I guess let's make some noise and fill this up. We have a roadmap in front of us, which is Spiritual Healing by Death in this case. So that kind of, presents its own framework, which is nice, but it also presents a challenge because each subsequent Death album gets more technical and more involved. The production values increase.
Yeah.
The lyrics get more thoughtful. And so it is kind of an escalating challenge with this band because we want to do justice to the source material, and, it's great material. That's why the Death albums are classic. So we feel like, yes, we have to, evoke that and have the same vibe, but we want to try to write something that's as close to that level of quality as we can, So it's a very different process from any other band that I've been in, But it's fun. It's a neat challenge.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, of course. Like you said, this one is a homage to Death's spiritual healing. I think even in the album title, right? So why this album specifically?
Right. Well, when we started the band, we didn't necessarily have a long-term plan or any goals besides just writing songs that sounded like Death that we enjoyed. And so it wasn't maybe as tightly focused as Dimensions of Horror and Twisted Prayers,
mm-hmm.
but it more or less was kind of our answer to Leprosy. And then once that record kind of got, some momentum behind it and we realized that this idea had some legs, we felt that we wanted to be more specific because every Death album has a pretty large progression, Scream Bloody Gore is markedly different than Leprosy, which is markedly different than Spiritual Healing, which is very different from Human, et cetera, all the way down the line.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it didn't really make sense to just smush it together into one thing. So with Dimensions of Horror, we really focused in on Scream Bloody Gore, and logically, if we kind of touched on Leprosy, we touched on Scream Bloody Gore. Moving forward in the discography, we wanted to do Spiritual Healing. We figured it made more sense to go chronologically rather than do something really raw and primitive and then follow it up with something really progressive and articulate. It just kind of didn't make sense,
Mm-hmm.
And it's also for guys my age, in their 40s, who guys and girls, but for people my age in their 40s, you remember that excitement of going to the record store and getting a new Death album and really not knowing what to expect because every album was such a quantum leap forward, So it's kind of it makes sense, and it's also nostalgic, and it's less of a steep escalation of challenge for us as songwriters.
Understood.
Take it step by step.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And in Spiritual Healing, it's noticeable how Chuck left behind some of the gory themes in favor of social commentary, like themes like violence, drugs, war, etc. Was that the case in Twisted Prayer? I think, at least in the first two tracks, it is, right? Inhumane and A Waste of Life.
Definitely, yeah. You know, part of what we pride ourselves on is, you know, attention to detail. You know, we even like looked at the fonts that are used on the layouts of the album and stuff. And so we wanted to move forward. And, you know, plus there's only so many songs about, you know, Italian horror movies and zombies and stuff that you can really touch on before you just get repetitive really fast. So I spoke with Terry Butler, who played bass on Leprosy and Spiritual Healing, and, you know, I just was trying to get some insight into where they were coming from. And his whole thing was like, you know, we just watched the 6 o'clock news and then kind of wrote about some of the morbid and, you know, dark things that were going on around us. So that was really where I took my cue from, was just looking around at the world. And unfortunately, for the world, but I guess fortunately for our lyrics, there's plenty of dark and horrible things happening all the time. You know, Fatal Illusions is a song about mass shootings, which obviously is a huge topic of national conversation right now. And Inhumane is about the death penalty and, you know, all this sort of thing. So it's still stuff that's thematically very dark and morbid in its way, but it's not like, you know, corpse rises from the ground, gets an axe, slaughters people kind of stuff. You know?
Of course, yeah. And tell us about the 2 bonus tracks that you had, The Exorcist and Legion of Doom. That was an interesting choice of covers as well.
The way that we kind of looked at it, because obviously we only really have one influence in this band, which is death, just to make it crystal clear. We looked around at their discography, and, you know, you can pick up on a band's influences by the things that they cover and stuff. And when Chuck and Gene were working on Individual Thought Patterns, they actually started recording a cover of The Exorcist. And Possessed is clearly one of Chuck's biggest influences, also one of my favorite bands. And our guitar player, Dan, happens to play in Possessed. So I was like, well, Dan already knows the song, so this can't get much easier. So I just kind of looked at it like, you know, Gene and Chuck never got a chance to finish it. So we went ahead and, you know, picked up where they left off kind of thing. Plus it's just really fun to sing Possessed stuff. And I love Jeff's voice. He's one of my absolute heroes in metal, period, not just death metal. So that was really cool. And then with Legion of Doom by Mantis, you know, Mantis is what death was called before they were called death. And Chuck lifted the riff from Legion of Doom and put it in the song Spiritual Healing for sort of one of the signature moments on the whole album. And I'm all about kind of making connections as a fan and as a musician, and kind of connecting the dots between how the records that meant a lot to me came to be. And I thought it was a neat opportunity to sort of show the through line from, you know, 16-year-olds in the garage to global touring band getting the musical sophistication, which is where the death was at the time of Spiritual Healing. But there's still those same riffs. There's still that same attitude and approach that really carries through from the very first Mantis Death by Metal demo all the way to Sound of Perseverance. And I wanted to kind of show that to people, because many people, myself included at the time, really had a hard time, you know, looking at the more sophisticated death stuff and seeing the connection. I'm like, what happened to this band that used to sing about rotting corpses? Like, now they have like all this like finger tapping and like crazy harmonies and melodies and all this really sophisticated stuff. Wow. But there really is still that same connection to the sort of underground, you know, teenage aggression of the early stuff.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You also have Ed Repka drawing the cover. The attention to detail is amazing. It's uncanny. He's the same artist who did the cover of Death, Scream, Bloody Gore, Spiritual Healing, and Leprosy as well, right?
Absolutely. You know, we're very fortunate in that Ed is still working. And when we signed the record contract with Relapse, you know, one of the things that we said was like, hey, I don't know what this guy charges because we've never worked with him before. So whatever the art budget is, like we're getting this guy to do the cover because it won't feel like a Death album without his artwork. You know, it's a key element, just like our logo is based on a Death logo. The art needs to evoke the same feeling so that it's really a total package, you know? And I mean, it is just about the attention to detail. And also, again, as a fan, it's exciting for me to know that the guy that drew some of my favorite album covers is drawing our covers. It's really fucking cool, you know?
It is indeed. I noticed as well the priest in the cover. I don't know, maybe I'm seeing things, but it looks to me a lot like the evil guy in Anthrax's Among the Living. Was that intentional? Or?
I can't speak to Ed's direction there, but you're not the first person to notice that. I've heard that a few times now, so I'm not sure. I mean, as far as what Ed was doing, he's such a phenomenal artist, and his work is so iconic. We just kind of give him the title, and like, I was like, it should be bright, and like maybe there's like stained glass. That was as much input as we gave him, and then we just get out of his way. It's like when you have a guy that's that good, you don't need to micromanage him or find out like what he's doing. We trust him, and everything he's come back to us with has just been a home run. So who knows where he gets his ideas, but I just am glad that they're still coming. You know?
Yeah, it is a cool cover, man. One of the best I've seen this year for sure. Yeah.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah. And James Murphy also makes a guest appearance. You mentioned him previously in a couple of songs like Crusade of Brutality and At Death's Door, right? So his work in the album is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. That was one of those moments, you know, that kind of took me back to being, I guess I was 14 when Spiritual Healing came out. And one of the biggest things, you know, obviously Chuck is the guy, he's the singer, he's the primary songwriter, he's the face of the band, the spokesperson of the band. But the thing that really jumped out at me as a young guitar player when I heard Spiritual Healing was the solos that James did. I mean, I was blown away. And death metal obviously is now, you know, 35 years old or 34 years old or whatever. Yeah. So it's been done, you know, we've heard it, we've seen it, whatever. Like, you know, it's hard to imagine any territory that hasn't been covered. But in 1990, when Spiritual Healing came out, there had never been a death metal record that had solos that good, you know, and James is a big part of that. Chuck did great stuff as well. But James was really like a super shredder. He was the guy that, you know, you could see playing for Testament, and he later went on to play in Testament, you know what I mean? Like, he was that good. And no one had heard that before on a death metal record. So that really opened up a lot of doors for the whole genre. I feel like, you know, Chuck cracked the door on Leprosy with his kind of articulate phrasing and tasteful solos, and then James took that crack and just kicked the door off of its hinges. So to have him on our record, again, makes it feel like a Death album and is something really special for me as a fan. And James is a guy I've known for a really long time. He's a great dude, amazing guitar player, great producer. So anything, you know, having him marginally involved with Gruesome is just something that means a lot to me personally, you know?
Yeah, for sure. You just mentioned something that I was gonna say actually, because death metal is not a genre that's particularly known for great guitar solos. But James' work on his album, and Dan Gonzalez as well. Oh my God, man, it's jaw-droppingly good.
I know, dude, right? It's crazy. I'm just trying to, like, you know, not look foolish next to these guys. Just that, yeah, no, Dan has really. I mean, he's an amazing musician, and I think because most people know him from Possessed, where he's playing the Possessed material. You know, he's doing, you know, he's very respectful to the legacy of Possessed. But I think it's cool seeing him get a little bit more room to stretch out with Gruesome, because he really is phenomenal, and he can play, you know, whatever. If you wanted to play a classic rock solo, he'll do that. If you wanted him to play a flamenco solo, he'll do that. If you want him to play, you know, something really tasteful with great phrasing, he'll do that, or something ridiculously technical with shredding. I mean, he is somebody that I can't really say enough good things about, you know, as a musician.
Yeah, cool.
As a person too, he's a lovely guy. So
I bet. Sonically speaking, did you guys use a similar equipment of death to reach the same sort of sound, the same, do you use the same recording techniques or not?
Well, I mean, I'm not terribly knowledgeable about this, so I can't get too deep into this answer, but I can say this. Our producer, Jared Pritchard, reached out to Scott Burns. He called Scott on the phone and had a lengthy, apparently, 2-hour conversation or something about how they recorded Spiritual Healing, as far as what mics they used, what preamps they used, what guitar amps they used, what kind of processing they put on things, how many tracks they did and where they panned them, and all of this sort of technical stuff that's well above my pay grade. But Jared milked Scott's brain as much as he could because, he obviously understands what we're trying to do, which is why he's worked on all of our records. And he really, I don't know what he got from Scott, but whatever it was, it really worked because the record, I mean, sonically, I feel that we've really come the closest to achieving our goal, which is just making an album that sounds like, side 3 and 4 of Spiritual Healing. That's what we wanted, And I feel like sonically, it's really pretty close. And Jared deserves a huge amount of credit for that. He really put a ton of work that was above and beyond the call of duty into the album. And the insights from Scott, I'm sure, did not hurt. We also spoke with Scott's assistant, Mark Prater, who worked on the record. So, I mean, it is pretty, we try to leave no stone unturned,
Yeah, sure. And speaking about the vocals, does it come naturally to you to replicate Chuck's voice, or is it more difficult than your usual singing voice?
It's a little bit more difficult, and it's especially a little bit more difficult because at this point, I'm 42, and Chuck was in his 20s when he was recording this stuff. So there's just a wear and tear that comes on your vocals from singing death metal for 20 years like I have been. And there's certain things about the timbre of Chuck's voice that I find frustratingly out of reach. To me, when I listen to the album, there'll be certain moments when I really feel like I'm just listening to death, and then my vocals come in and ruin it for me. I'm like, who's this jerk? It's not Chuck. But I'm getting, I feel like every record gets a little bit closer. This one sounds more like, Chuck had a cold kind of thing, which is, it's close.
Yeah.
The more natural kind of timbre for my voice is a little bit closer to Jeff from Possessed, actually. And so when I sang the Possessed cover, it was a little bit more comfortable for me because I wasn't concentrating so much on, using a specific part of my throat, because ultimately what you're doing in this kind of music is you're pushing against your throat in order to produce a growl that, is not normally there or whatever. So.
Yeah. Do you think singing like Chuck did in Control the Night would be possible for you?
Well, I that's a little bit harder. Not in that I can't sing. I actually have a project called Pounder, which is we play like Diamond Head and Tigers of Pantang and Iron Maiden style heavy metal, and I sing in that band. Not that I'm a great singer, but I'm I'm singing on pitch and stuff. But it's a lot more difficult to kind of imitate the timbre of someone's voice when it's their actual singing voice, because that really has so much to do with the individual. And maybe just because I don't have as much experience singing on pitch, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that as being particularly likely. So, I mean, but then again, I didn't think doing a third Gruesome album was particularly likely. So I'm wrong all the time. Who knows?
Yeah, well, one can hope, right?
Thanks, man.
Yeah, but when you address all the Death albums, what is the idea? I mean, are you gonna continue with Gruesome and create new stuff, or what is? And is this a concern to you at all?
It's luckily at this point we're just, I guess, really not, almost halfway. So we have a lot of unexplored territory to go. The one thing that I would never want to do with this band would be to try to develop, quote unquote, our own style, because the band is conceived as an homage to death. And I don't want to be like, hey, thanks for buying these other records because they sounded like that. Now here's some other stuff, because I think that feels dishonest to the audience and it feels disrespectful to the source material, especially when we all play in other bands where we can get our creativity out elsewhere, so I kind of feel like, we'll jump off that bridge when we get to it. I mean, who knows if we'll even make it that far.
Yeah, and you're about to embark on an extensive European tour, including Wacken Festival, right? Expectations must be high.
I try not to think about that kind of stuff because, the more you think about the expectations, and the more you psych yourself out, or the more you worry about what somebody else is thinking or hoping for, you kind of can take the enjoyment out of it for yourself, I just hope that we play the songs tight and people come out and bang their heads and we all sit around and talk about how much we like Death, and it's a good time, That's as far as I try to think, I don't want to think too far into it, because then I'll just get caught up in that instead of just concentrating on playing the songs and having fun,
Yeah, sure. There's another appearance as well at the Obscene Extreme Festival in the Czech Republic, where Exhumed is actually playing as well, along with Napalm Death, Suffocation, Asphyx. How are you going to handle those two shows, man?
Well, we're playing the same day, so it's going to be pretty tough. I've been kind of trying to get prepared. I've been spending more time, just out running, trying to run a couple, 2 or 3 miles a day if I can. And, just practicing guitar more, just trying to sit down and play for a couple hours a day kind of thing. And just really rely on your muscle memory and your stamina, that's really all you've got in that situation. And, hopefully my voice holds out and, try not to drink too much before the show. That's my game plan. We'll see what happens, but if I don't make it back, you'll know why.
Yeah, for sure. Just to take a quick sidetrack from Gruesome, what are the other plans for Exhumed at this point?
We are slowly working on some new material. We have a U.S. tour coming up that's getting announced this week. I think it gets announced tomorrow. Which is a really cool package that we're very stoked about. And we just did a European tour in April, but we're going back over to Europe in September just to kind of play a few places that we didn't play. And we're playing a festival in Scotland in Edinburgh, which is really exciting because our last album was a concept album about a bunch of murders and grave robberies that happened in Edinburgh in the late 1820s. So it's really cool for us to be able to go to where that happened and play a big show in front of a lot of people and bring that story, to life as much as we can with guitars. So that's going to be something that's kind of unique and special,
Yeah, cool. And Gruesome has not announced North American tour dates yet, right?
Not yet. We're kind of casting around feelers and, looking for the right opportunity that fits everybody's schedules and allows us to, come home and still have the lights turn on and that kind of stuff. So I think the band has been growing and growing, and we're at the point where we're going to be able to do this in a way that will allow us to be, comfortable enough to do it and deliver a good show for people, so hopefully we'll have something to announce on that front, pretty soon.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm here in Toronto. I'm hoping you guys announce a date here soon enough.
Yeah, Toronto's tough for me because I have a DUI, so I can't always get into Canada. So it's not as bad with Gruesome because I'm the only person with a criminal record, whereas in Exhumed, everybody has DUIs and there's some, assault charge floating around there somewhere, and we're much more sort of unsavory as people. And Gruesome is pretty much nice folks.
Yeah, well, I'll keep my fingers crossed, man. Who knows? All right.
Awesome, me too, man. I love playing in Canada. It's rules up there.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for your time. I think we reached the end, but all the best with the new release, and hopefully we can catch up soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care, dude.
All right, you got it. Take care, bud.
All right, everyone. That was my interview with Matt Harvey from Gruesome. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast in order to get notified of all of our interviews, as well as our Talking Perspectives weekly podcast discussion. And of course, make sure you like us on Facebook, Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit our website at www.sonicperspectives.com. Once again, I'm Rodrigo Altaf. Bye-bye.